Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you're walking into a totally unremarkable, maybe slightly rundown local diner.
Right, just a greasy spoon.
Exactly. It's 2011,
Yeah.
and the air is just thick with that smell of, cheap ground beef frying on a flat-top grill, burnt coffee, and old fryer oil.
Oh, I know that exact smell.
Yeah. So you walk past the counter, you head all the way to the back pantry, and you step past these massive industrial-sized cans of tomato sauce.
Like the big catering ones.
Right, the huge ones. And you take one step down, and suddenly the temperature drops.
Just immediately.
Immediately. You take another step, and the air entirely shifts. The smell of the frying grease is just, it's gone. And it's replaced by this sharp scent of sulfur from a nearby paper mill and the really distinct aroma of unfiltered cigarettes.
Which is such a specific sensory detail.
It really is, because you haven't just walked into a different room. You have walked out of the 21st century and stepped perfectly into Lisbon Falls, Maine at exactly 11:58 a.m. on September 9th, 1958.
What's fascinating here is how immediately Stephen King grounds this massive reality-bending sci-fi concept in the absolute mundane.
Yeah, there's no lab.
No lab, no flux capacitor, there are no spinning gears, no flashing lights, no localized magnetic fields, right? It is literally just a dark spot by the canned goods.
Just a step down.
Yeah. The narrative just completely bypasses the technology of time travel because, well, it's not interested in the physics at all.
Right.
It is entirely interested in the morality of the journey, the psychology of the traveler, and really the staggering, terrifying consequences of trying to, rewrite human suffering.
And that is exactly our mission today. So welcome to the deep dive. Whether you're a massive history buff, a sci-fi aficionado, or just someone who lies awake at night playing that what-if game with your own life.
We all do it.
We totally do. Well, this deep dive is crafted specifically for you. We are taking a really comprehensive, immersive journey through Stephen King's monumental novel, 112263.
And we're pulling from the cortex Stephen King's own deeply researched afterword and some supplementary discussion materials to really tear this narrative apart.
So we can give you a definitive shortcut to the profound insights layered throughout this story. Because, it is a massive, sprawling epic.
It really is. It covers years of a man's life lived in a past that just does not belong to him.
Yeah.
We're going to be examining the true mechanics of history, the brutal realities of the butterfly effect, and the unimaginable emotional toll of trying to play God.
Right, trying to fix things.
Exactly. Ultimately, we're going to explore how this narrative forces us to ask a really terrifying question, which is, are our darkest historical tragedies actually the structural glue that holds our reality together?
Wow. Yeah, that is the big question. So our guide through this whole existential nightmare is a guy named Jake Epping.
Just an ordinary guy.
Completely. He's a 35-year-old high school English teacher in Lisbon Falls. Newly divorced and, well, admittedly kind of emotionally numb.
His ex-wife actually left him because she felt he was incapable of deep feeling.
Yeah, literally her words. He's just going through the motions of life. And the catalyst for this entire epic journey, a journey that, eventually targets the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
It doesn't start with geopolitics.
No, not at all. It starts with a red grading pen in a quiet teacher's lounge.
So Jake is grading these GED essays for his adult evening English class. And he'd given his students this really standard open-ended prompt.
The day that changed my life.
Right, and one of the essays comes from the high school janitor, this man named Harry Dunning.
And the teenagers at the school are awful to him. They call him Hop-Toed Harry because he walks with this severe permanent limp.
And the essay itself is a mess mechanically. Like, it's written in this cheap ballpoint pen. It's smeared all across the page. The spelling is atrocious.
Grammar is practically non-existent.
Right, but the actual narrative it contains is absolutely harrowing. Harry writes about Halloween night in 1958.
God, this part is so dark.
It really is. He describes how his father, Frank Dunning, came home in just a drunken, psychotic rage.
And he didn't just hurt his family.
No, he systematically butchered them. He murdered Harry's mother, his brother Arthur, and he left his little sister Ellen in a coma she would never wake from.
And it was a hammer, right?
A sledgehammer. Harry only survived because he managed to hide under a bed. And he describes the blood of his family literally pooling and running into his eyes while he hid.
Oh, wow.
But before Frank was stopped, he landed this devastating blow on Harry's leg, which is what left him permanently disabled.
The juxtaposition King creates in this scene is just brilliant. Because you have Jake sitting in this sterile, quiet teacher's lounge, right?
Yeah, listening to a basketball game down the hall.
Exactly. The muffled sounds of the game echoing. And he's holding this piece of paper that contains the most raw, unimaginable human horror.
And it shatters that emotional block he had.
Completely. He breaks down crying. He gives this mechanically flawed essay an A+ because it is just the most honest piece of writing he has ever encountered.
It's the inciting incident, and it works on such a microscopic level.
I like to think of it like a loose thread on a knitted sweater.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. It's this tiny, localized tragedy in Derry, Maine. But that single loose thread is going to unravel Jake's entire universe.
Because shortly after grading this essay, Jake's friend Al, who owns the local diner, calls him in.
Right, and Al is dying of lung cancer.
Yeah, he's at the end. And his dying act is to show Jake this pantry. He reveals the rabbit hole to 1958 and basically passes the torch.
And suddenly, Jake has a choice. And it's a profound one. Because if you had the power to change just one small thing for a genuinely kind, damaged man who has suffered his entire life.
Wouldn't you do it?
Exactly. Wouldn't you? You wouldn't even think about the space-time continuum. You'd just step through that door to grab a hammer out of a madman's hand.
It serves as the ultimate moral bait. The narrative hooks both Jake and the reader by framing time travel not as this grand, abstract historical mission, but as an act of basic, undeniable human empathy.
Because who wouldn't want to save a child from a monster?
Exactly. But to understand why this simple act of empathy eventually becomes a cosmic nightmare, we really have to look at the absolute unforgiving mechanics of this specific rabbit hole.
Right. The rules. Al lays them out, and they are ironclad.
So the first rule is spatial and temporal permanence.
Meaning,
No matter when you step into the pantry in 2011, Tuesday, Thursday, midnight, noon, it always deposits you at exactly 11:58 a.m. on September 9, 1958.
a completely fixed drop point.
A fixed drop point.
Okay, and the second rule deals with duration. Time is disproportionate.
Right, the 2-minute rule.
Yeah. You could step into 1958, stay there for 2 minutes, and walk back.
Yeah.
Or you could stay in the past for 10 years. You could age a decade, build a career, live a whole life.
Get married, buy a house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you finally walk back up those pantry stairs and emerge into 2011, exactly 2 minutes have passed in the present day. You return practically the second after you left.
Which is mind-bending, but, manageable. It's the third rule that transforms the rabbit hole from a magical doorway into a psychological trap.
The hard reset.
The hard reset. Every trip is the first trip.
This is the brutal part. Let's say you go back to 1958, spend months tracking down Frank Dunning, save Harry's family, and return to 2011.
Okay, so Harry's family is saved.
Right. Harry is a whole, healthy man. But if you walk down those pantry stairs one more time, even just to grab a cup of coffee in 1958,
Just for a second.
every single thing you did on the previous trip is instantly erased. The timeline aggressively snaps back to its original setting.
Harry's family is dead again.
The slate is wiped totally clean.
The philosophical weight of that reset mechanic is staggering when you really think about it.
It isolates the time traveler completely.
Right, because you become the only human being in existence who remembers the alternate timelines. You carry the memories of ghosts who don't know they died, and you carry the grief of lives that were unlived.
It means Jake can never just casually check on his work.
No, he can't. It introduces this impossible ethical dilemma. You have a cosmic undo button to erase any catastrophic mistakes you might make.
Which sounds great.
It does. But to trigger that undo button, you must simultaneously commit mass murder on the alternate timeline you created, erasing every good thing you achieved and every relationship you built.
Man. So knowing this, Jake decides he needs a test run before he even considers the massive undertaking of saving JFK.
A proof of concept.
Exactly. He goes back to 1958, adopts the alias George Amberson, and decides his primary test will be saving Harry Dunning's family.
So he travels to Derry, Maine, to stalk Frank Dunning in the weeks leading up to Halloween.
And this is where the novel introduces its true central antagonist.
Because the villain isn't a person.
No, the villain is time itself. As Al warns him right before he dies, the past is obdurate. It does not want to be changed.
This flips the traditional science fiction trope totally on its head. Usually we see the timeline depicted as fragile.
Like the classic Ray Bradbury Sound of Thunder concept.
Right, where stepping on a butterfly alters the entire course of evolution.
But King envisions the timeline not as fragile glass, but as thick, resilient rubber.
It is stubborn, and more importantly, it is actively, semi-sentiently hostile to interference. The larger the historical event you attempt to alter, the harder the past fights back.
It possesses a localized defense mechanism. And here's where it gets really interesting. Think about how the human immune system functions.
Okay.
When a foreign body enters the bloodstream, a virus, bacteria, or in this case, Jake Epping, a time traveler,
Oh.
the body doesn't just let it wander around.
Right, it attacks.
Exactly. If that foreign body tries to attack a vital organ, a major historical event, the past detects the anomaly. It triggers an immediate immune response.
It floods the area with white blood cells to eliminate the threat.
But in the reality of 11U263, those white blood cells take the form of flat tires, sudden illnesses, violent coincidences, and plunging trees.
The escalation of that immune response is terrifying to watch because Jake performs a microtest first.
Yeah, with a young girl.
Right, Carolyn Poulin. He tries to save her from a hunting accident that left her paralyzed.
Which is a tragedy, obviously.
Absolutely a tragedy, but in the grand tapestry of global history, it's a minor thread.
So the past offers some resistance, a few delays, a bit of bad luck, but Jake forces his way through and saves her.
However, when he targets Frank Dunning, the resistance multiplies exponentially. On the night of the planned Halloween murder, as Jake is gearing up to intervene, he doesn't just get a flat tire.
No, he is struck by violently crippling sudden stomach cramps.
A timeline is literally sickening his physical body to incapacitate him.
And when the biological attack fails to stop him, the timeline orchestrates human interference. Out of nowhere, Jake faces an immediate physical threat from a local man named Bill Turcotte.
Right, who just happens to be there.
And Bill happens to have his own personal vendetta against Frank Dunning, and he nearly derails Jake's meticulously planned rescue by holding him at gunpoint.
It's this cascade of wildly improbable obstacles. The math probability just breaks down completely.
It's the universe aggressively trying to maintain its predetermined shape.
Alongside this active, violent resistance, Jake experiences a subtler, deeply unsettling phenomenon. The past doesn't just fight, it echoes.
Yeah, Al Templeton summarized it by adapting that famous quote, "History doesn't repeat itself, but it harmonizes."
These harmonic echoes are everywhere, and they create this suffocating sense of paranoia.
Names, numbers, phrases, and specific situations repeat across different timelines and different geographical locations.
Like with the pawn shops.
Yes. When Jake is in Derry in 1958, he deals with a local pawnbroker named Chaz Fraudy.
Right.
Years later, when he moves down to Texas to prepare for the Kennedy assassination, he walks into a pawn shop and meets a man named Frank Fraudy.
And he has almost identical mannerisms.
The same cadence in his voice, similar family connections, it's uncanny.
Jake constantly hears the same snatches of conversation from random strangers, separated by thousands of miles and half a decade.
He encounters the same specific models of cars broken down on the side of the road in the exact same configurations.
The text uses these coincidences to establish that the past is constantly trying to force events back into their deeply worn grooves.
For Jake, it creates a terrifying psychological landscape because nothing's random anymore.
A delayed bus isn't just a delayed bus.
Right. Food poisoning isn't just bad fish. Every minor inconvenience is interpreted as a targeted, sentient attack from the fabric of reality. He's a man engaged in a guerrilla war with existence itself.
And the physical geography of where he fights these battles deeply impacts his psyche.
Oh, absolutely.
To stop the Dunning massacre, Jake has to embed himself in Derry, Maine for weeks.
And anyone familiar with Stephen King's broader universe knows that Derry is profoundly cursed.
It's the setting of it.
Exactly. And Jake, who knows nothing about killer clowns or ancient cosmic evils, he immediately senses that something is fundamentally wrong with the town.
He describes the atmosphere as malevolent.
The people are closed off, violently suspicious, and there is a pervasive, casual cruelty to everyday interactions.
Derry functions as a microcosm of the obdurate past, operating on a local level. It is a geographic location that actively resists goodness and feeds on suffering.
Jake uncovers the history of the bad times in Derry Unsolved Murders, a staggering, statistically impossible number of missing children, horrifying acts of domestic violence that the town completely ignores.
The apathy of the citizens is a symptom of an infected environment.
There is an incredibly chilling sequence where Jake wanders out near the ruins of the Kitchener Ironworks.
Oh, I know the exact scene you're talking about.
Which is a place where an explosion killed scores of children in the past. He stands near a fallen smokestack, and he spots a heap of gnawed animal bones and a child's kitten collar.
Just lying there.
And then something from deep inside the rusted pipe, something ancient, hibernating, and utterly monstrous, actually projects a whisper into his mind.
Coaxing him to come in and see.
It's pure distilled dread.
It's a masterful blending of King's horror roots with this historical thriller structure. That whispering entity, the latent darkness saturated in Derry's soil, it really represents the gravitational pull of the unaltered timeline.
It thrives on the precise type of tragedy that Jake is trying to prevent.
Right. Jake realizes that the reality he's walking on in Derry is just a thin skim of ice over a deep lake of dark water.
But he does manage to stop Frank Dunning. He saves Harry, Arthur, and Ellen.
But the psychological toll of existing in Derry's corrupted atmosphere nearly breaks him before his true mission even begins.
He survives Derry, he saves the kids, and he finally pivots to the main objective. Dallas, Texas, 1963.
But because of the fixed drop point in 1958, he has 5 years to kill before the assassination.
Right, he can't just fast forward.
Yep.
During this waiting period, he settles in a small town outside of Dallas called Jody, and the contrast is jarring.
Night and day?
If Derry is a damp, infected nightmare, Jody is a warm, sun-drenched dream.
Jody represents the idealized, nostalgic American small town of the late 50s and early 60s.
The community is tight-knit, the people are genuinely welcoming, and Jake, still operating under the alias George Amberson, he finds a profound sense of belonging that he never achieved in 2011.
He gets a job teaching high school English. He directs the school plays like Of Mice and Men. He attends local dances.
He integrates deeply into the fabric of this society.
Most importantly, Jody is where he meets Sadie Dunhill.
Sadie, yeah.
Sadie is the new high school librarian. She's remarkably tall, a bit clumsy, heavily self-conscious about her appearance, but fiercely intelligent, fiercely loyal, and undeniably compelling.
They fall into this beautiful, authentic, slow-burn romance. She becomes his absolute anchor in the past.
Sadie is the emotional core of the novel. She represents the life Jake could have if he wasn't burdened by this cosmic mission.
She grounds his humanity.
But structurally, her presence complicates everything. Jake ceases to be an impartial, clinical observer waiting to snipe an assassin. He becomes a man with a massive personal stake in a timeline that he fundamentally does not belong to.
I have to challenge the narrative framing here, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
We look at Jody as this reprieve from the horrors of Derry. But is it possible that the past isn't just overtly evil, but deeply, calculatingly manipulative? Because the obdurate past knows it can't just fight Jake with stomach cramps and flat tires for 5 straight years.
Right, he'd get used to it.
It needs leverage. So does the idyllic warmth of Jody, and specifically Sadie, exist merely to give Jake something to lose?
Oh, wow, like a trap.
Exactly. The universe gives him the perfect life, knowing that when the time comes to pull the trigger on Oswald, Jake will have to weigh the fate of the entire world against the specific, beautiful life he's built with this one woman.
That is dark.
The past makes his historical mission infinitely harder by taking his heart hostage.
That is a brilliant way to interpret the narrative architecture, because the past operates on a ledger of tragic irony. It doesn't just oppose him, it outmaneuvers him emotionally. By allowing him to find love in Jody, it raises the stakes from a sterile political thriller to an intimately personal tragedy. The cost of altering history won't just be physical danger, it will be personal devastation.
So let's shift to that political thriller aspect, specifically the ultimate target, Lee Harvey Oswald.
Okay.
Jake moves to the Dallas area to begin his surveillance. Now, he isn't flying blind. Al Templeton spent years researching the assassination before passing the mission to Jake.
Right, Al did his homework.
And Al's notes state there was a 95% probability that Lee Harvey Oswald acted completely alone.
The novel relies heavily on exhaustive historical research here. Stephen King explicitly details in his afterword that after reading a mountain of source material, FBI reports, and competing conspiracy theories, he concluded that the probability of Oswald acting alone is closer to 98 or 99%.
Wow.
The narrative characterizes Oswald not as a brilliant intelligence operative, not as a CIA asset, and not as a mob patsy.
No, instead, he is depicted as a dangerous little fame junkie.
Exactly. He's a deeply unstable, narcissistic, grandiose man with a history of domestic abuse and a cheap mail-order rifle who got incredibly, tragically lucky.
But even with that 95% or 99% certainty, Jake can't just walk up to Oswald in 1960 and shoot him in an alley.
No, because of the window of uncertainty.
Right, because if there is a 5% chance of a wider conspiracy, say, rogue elements of the CIA, the mob, or figures like the Russian emigre George de Mohrenschildt pulling the strings, then killing Oswald too early might be catastrophic.
This raises an important question about the mechanics of historical intervention, because if Jake kills Oswald in 1960 and a broader conspiracy actually exists, those conspirators wouldn't just give up.
They'd just find someone else.
They would simply recruit a different shooter for November 22, 1963.
And Jake would have irreparably altered history, committing murder in the process, but JFK would still die.
And Jake would have completely lost his only lead. To be absolutely certain he is eliminating the true and only threat, Jake is forced to observe Oswald for years.
He rents an apartment next door.
He bugs the walls, listens to Oswald beat his wife, tracks his movements to New Orleans, and painstakingly verifies that Oswald is operating entirely in a vacuum.
Listening to Jake unpack the Kennedy assassination through the bug in Oswald's wall forces us to confront how we process history.
How so?
We are culturally drawn to massive labyrinthine conspiracies because the alternative is deeply unsettling.
Right, we were talking about Occam's razor.
The philosophical principle that the simplest explanation, the one requiring the fewest assumptions, is usually the correct one.
The human mind naturally rebels against the idea of disproportionate cause and effect.
Yeah, Norman Mailer is actually quoted in the book, observing that it is virtually unassimilable to our reason that a small, lonely, insignificant man could fell a giant in the midst of his legions.
We desperately want the cause, the assassin, and the plot to be as large, complex, and profound as the effect, which was the altered course of global history.
We want it to make sense on a grand scale.
But the text argues powerfully against that comfort. It strips away the mythos and forces the reader to look at the terrifying reality that a single, angry nobody can independently shatter the world.
I want to pause here for our listeners to make something explicitly clear.
Sure.
When we discuss John F. Kennedy, George Wallace, Edwin Walker, and the various theories surrounding Oswald, we're strictly unpacking the narrative architecture of Stephen King's fictional construct.
Right. We are analyzing how the novel interprets these figures to explore its themes of fate and intervention.
Exactly. We are entirely impartial, and we are not taking any political stance on the historical events or the real-world figures themselves. Our focus is solely on the reality built within these pages.
A vital distinction. Because within the specific reality of this novel, as the calendar ticks closer to November 1963, the past stops playing defense and goes on the offensive with a ferocity Jake has never seen.
And just as we theorized earlier, its primary weapon is Sadie.
The obdurate past weaponizes Sadie's own history. Sadie has an estranged ex-husband, Johnny Clayton.
And Johnny is deeply disturbed, profoundly misogynistic, and violently obsessed with her.
Right as Jake is closing in on his final verification that Oswald is acting alone, the past nudges Johnny Clayton right to Sadie's doorstep in Jody.
The sequence is agonizing. Johnny takes Sadie hostage in her own home. He intends to torture and kill her.
Jake, who is hours away monitoring Oswald, gets this feeling that something is wrong.
And he's forced to abandon his surveillance to race across the state.
He arrives in time to stop Johnny from murdering her, but he is too late to prevent a horrific act of violence.
Johnny slashes Sadie's face from her cheek down to her mouth with a butcher knife, leaving her severely, permanently disfigured.
It's a devastating consequence of Jake's split focus. Sadie survives, but she is fundamentally, physically altered.
Yet the tragedy deepens their bond in a way that is incredibly profound.
Jake doesn't pull away.
No, he stays by her side through the surgeries, the trauma, and the public staring. The emotional anchor of their relationship during this dark period is summarized by a Japanese proverb Jake shares with her.
If there is love, smallpox scars are as pretty as dimples.
He truly, deeply loves her, scars and all. He even offers to abandon the mission.
Really?
Yeah, he offers to take her back to 2011 with him, where modern plastic surgery could repair her face.
Wow.
But to do that, they first have to survive the approaching date, November 22nd.
Sadie, having learned the truth about time travel and realizing the immense weight of Jake's mission, refuses to be left behind or coddled.
She insists on accompanying him to Dallas to stop Oswald.
Which brings us to the climax at the Texas School Book Depository. The date finally arrives.
And the past throws the absolute kitchen sink at them to ensure they never reach Dealey Plaza.
It is pure, unrelenting chaos. The universe is screaming at them.
As they race toward Dallas, their car breaks down catastrophically. A literal broken axle trenching into the asphalt.
They're forced to abandon it and steal another car.
Then they're confronted by a hostile stranger with a knife, And Sadie, the sweet high school librarian, actually has to fight him off with her own weapon.
They are physically running through the crowded streets of Dallas.
Jake is limping on a violently inflamed knee, his heart pounding, racing the clock as the president's motorcade approaches.
The timeline creates unnatural traffic jams, throws dense crowds into their path, pulling every string it can to run out the clock.
They finally manage to breach the book depository.
They fight their way up to the 6th floor, arriving just as Oswald is preparing to squeeze the trigger for his first shot.
And here, in the sniper's nest, the obdurate past exacts its final, terrible toll.
Jake bursts into the room. He shouts to distract Oswald.
And the distraction works. Oswald misses the shot. The president's life is saved.
But in the ensuing chaotic struggle in that tiny room, Oswald turns his weapon away from the window and fires into the room.
And Sadie, who had bravely followed Jake into the line of fire, is struck.
Jake physically stops the assassination. Kennedy lives. The timeline of the 20th century is fundamentally altered in an instant.
But Sadie dies bleeding in Jake's arms on the dusty floor of the depository.
The past demanded a blood sacrifice for the monumental change Jake forced upon it, and it precisely targeted the thing Jake loved most in the world.
So what does this all mean? I want you, the listener, to really sit with this moral arithmetic. Put yourself in Jake's shoes.
You've spent 5 years in the past.
You found a sense of peace you never knew. You found the love of your life. And you were forced to trade her life for the life of John F. Kennedy.
Is saving a president, even with all the geopolitical good you assume will cascade from that survival, worth the agonizing, bloody sacrifice of the woman who held your hand in the dark?
It is a crushing, hollow victory.
It's a Pyrrhic victory of the highest order. Jake becomes a secret national hero in this altered 1963. He is thanked by the FBI, he is personally thanked by JFK, in a private phone call.
But he is entirely hollowed out.
The only thing keeping him going is the desperate need to know that Sadie's sacrifice was worth it. He has to return to 2011 to see the utopia his actions have surely created.
Right. He assumes he's going to walk back into a golden age. He expects flying cars, world peace, an America that fulfilled all its brightest promises because Kennedy lived to guide it.
So he makes the long trek back to the rabbit hole in Maine.
He steps up the stairs, out of the pantry, and into 2011. And he steps into an absolute suffocating nightmare.
The 2011 he returns to is an apocalyptic wasteland. The novel reveals the horrific reality of the dystopian butterfly effect.
By saving Kennedy, Jake didn't usher in a golden age. He fundamentally broke the world.
The historical details King maps out are chilling in their logical progression. Kennedy survives Dallas, but he is permanently paralyzed in a subsequent assassination attempt later in his term.
Because he is weakened and politically compromised, the Civil Rights Act fails to pass.
The racial divide deepens. Eventually, George Wallace, a staunch segregationist, exploits the unrest and becomes president.
The Vietnam War doesn't end peacefully. Instead, the geopolitical tension snaps, escalating into a massive nuclear exchange that the world refers to as Hanoi Hell.
Because history was entirely derailed, crucial environmental regulations were never enacted, leading to a cascade of massive nuclear plant meltdowns across the country.
Including a catastrophic one in New England.
The continental United States is literally tearing apart from massive, unprecedented earthquakes.
And on a psychological level, the global suicide rate has skyrocketed because humanity fundamentally, subconsciously feels that reality itself is wrong.
Jake is forced to navigate the radioactive ruins of his hometown. And in a moment of devastating irony, he actually encounters Harry Dunning,
the man whose GED essay started this entire journey.
But this alternate version of Harry is wheelchair-bound from nuclear fallout, living in the irradiated ruins of Maine.
Jake successfully saved Harry from his father's sledgehammer in 1958, only to inadvertently condemn him to a slow, agonizing death by radiation poisoning in 2011.
It's the most brutal irony imaginable. The road to hell wasn't just paved with good intentions, it was paved with immense sacrifice.
But the fundamental question is why? Why did saving one man's life in Dallas cause literal earthquakes in Maine 50 years later?
To understand the physical breakdown of reality, we have to look at the card man.
Right. Throughout Jake's journeys back and forth, he notices these vagrant men guarding the rabbit hole by the diner.
First, there was a man with a yellow card in his hat, then an older man with a black card, and finally, in the apocalyptic 2011, a dying, terrified man clutching a green card.
These entities are not human. They are guardians of the temporal portals scattered across the universe.
They are the toll collectors of time, and they're completely losing their minds.
Precisely. Their insanity is the key to understanding the mechanics of this universe.
The dying green card man explains the structural nature of time. Reality is constructed of strings.
When a time traveler alters the past, they don't cleanly overwrite the old timeline. They create a new string that vibrates alongside the original.
But the old string still exists as a harmonic resonance. These guardians are forced to mentally hold all these multiple conflicting reality strings in their minds simultaneously to keep the portal stable.
The cognitive dissonance literally drives them mad.
And the scale of the change matters. If you save a paralyzed girl, you create a tiny vibration.
But altering a massive watershed moment like November 20 Tech 1963 creates intolerable tearing strain on the actual fabric of time.
The timeline isn't just a river you can casually divert with a dam. It's a physical, load-bearing structure.
By ripping John F. Kennedy out of his predetermined death, Jake put so much stress on the temporal fabric that reality itself is fraying.
That's why the earthquakes are happening. The atomic structure of the universe is collapsing under the weight of the paradox.
The conclusion is stark and inescapable. The past wasn't just being cruel when it fought Jake with stomach cramps and flat tires. It was operating as a survival mechanism.
It was fighting for the continued existence of reality.
Some threads of history are simply too load-bearing to be pulled. If you pull them, the entire tapestry unravels.
The tragedies, no matter how horrific, are structural.
Jake realizes what he has to do. There's no fixing the dystopia. The only way to save the world from this slow, radioactive death is to utilize the rabbit hole's third rule.
He has to walk back down those pantry stairs to September 9th, 1958.
And the second his foot touches the floor in the past, he has to turn around and immediately walk back up into 2011.
He has to trigger the hard reset.
Triggering the reset will erase everything. It will restore the original, unbroken timeline.
John F. Kennedy will die in Dallas.
The Vietnam War will happen as we know it.
Harry Dunning's family will be butchered by a sledgehammer.
And Sadie. Sadie will never have met a man named George Amberson.
She will survive the attack from her ex-husband because Jake won't be there to intervene, but she will live her entire life never knowing the love they shared.
Jake has to intentionally erase his own grand, profound love story to save existence itself.
It is an act of profound, agonizing grace. Jake makes the trip. He steps down, the timeline snaps back, and he returns to the normal, unaltered 2011 we all inhabit.
But the cost is total exile.
Yeah.
He can never go back to the past again because stepping through that door would initiate another reset, risking the fragile fabric of reality yet again.
He is trapped in the present, carrying the memories of a ghost.
But Stephen King doesn't leave us there in the cold. The novel ends with an epilogue that is an absolute gut punch of bittersweet beauty.
The chapter is called Citizen of the Century.
In the year 2012, an aging Jake does some internet research and discovers that Sadie Dunhill is still alive in Jody, Texas.
She survived her ex-husband's attack in this timeline. She still bears the terrible facial scar, and she channeled her life into public service, becoming a beloved pillar of the community.
She's in her 80s now, and the town is throwing a festival to honor her as Jody's Citizen of the Century.
Jake cannot resist. He travels down to Texas to attend the ceremony.
He approaches this elderly, beautiful woman who should have absolutely no memory of him because the man she loved was fundamentally erased from the timeline.
Yet when she looks at him, there is a flicker. A deep harmonic echo resonates between them.
She looks at this stranger and asks him, "Who are you?" "Because I know you."
Blood calls to blood. Even erased by the brutal mechanics of time, the resonance of that pure love remains vibrating in the strings of reality.
Jake doesn't try to explain the rabbit hole or the assassination. He simply smiles at her and says, "Someone you knew in another life, honey."
And he asks her to dance.
It ties back beautifully to a recurring motif established early in the novel. Dancing is life.
Despite the trauma, despite the immutability of a tragic past, and despite the heavy burdens we carry, life continues.
The act of living it fully, of connecting with another human being even for a moment, is the only defiance we have against the obdurate nature of time.
We've journeyed from a blood-stained pantry in Maine, through the sunlit streets of Texas, into the frantic, screaming chaos of the Texas School Book Depository, and finally into the terrifying ashes of an apocalyptic wasteland.
And we did it all to discover something incredibly humbling. We discovered that some threads of history, no matter how steeped in grief or injustice, are simply too load-bearing to be pulled.
Knowledge of this magnitude is a heavy burden. Understanding the complex mechanics of our reality, that our deepest tragedies might be inextricably linked to our continued existence, is a profoundly sobering realization. It reframes how we view regret.
Thank you so much for taking this immense journey with us and for trusting us to navigate these murky, complex waters with you. But before we fade out, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
We spend so much time in our own lives looking back, romanticizing the idea of a do-over.
We agonize over our past mistakes, wishing we could step through our own diner pantry and change just one decision, unsay one word, avoid one heartbreak.
But what if our personal timeline operates exactly like Jake's?
What if the tragedies, the scars, and the moments of immense grief you've experienced aren't just senseless pain? What if those specific moments of darkness are actually the foundational load-bearing pillars keeping your current reality and the very people you love within it completely intact? Something to think about.